Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is James Kelly. I am a board member of Americans for Legal Reform, and I'm pleased. Let's try it again. Testing. Okay, good. Hello, everybody. My name is James Kelly. I'm a board member for Americans for Legal Reform. I want to welcome everybody here on this Veterans Day and say a couple of quick words about veterans, and I'm going to let Jim Fiegel introduce tonight's guest speaker. A lot of times we just take Veterans Day for granted, but every now and again somebody really holds their oath to protect this country and the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic, very seriously. And they realize that it's not an oath that ends. And Jim Fiegel is who I think of when that crosses my mind. People ask him why he does what he does with the courts. Well, when I look at him, I say that's got to be it. He can speak for himself on that, but I think it goes to the conscience in this country. Not too many years ago, there was COVID, and there was the issue of what's more important, rights or lives, and that was really what the big controversy was. And a lot of people said, well, lives are more important than rights. Well, there's a lot of veterans that I think would disagree with that. But I'm going to turn that over to Jim before he introduces tonight's speaker. Jim?
Thank you, Jim, and thank you.
You're welcome.
For the kind words. I also would like to thank each and every veteran on this Veterans Day. Good evening. My name's James Fiegel, and welcome to tonight's meeting of American for Legal Reform. I'm a board member, victim of family court, as well as an active court watcher and advocate. For those who may be joining us for the first time, our organization is dedicated to promoting transparency, accountability, and fairness within the American legal system. We advocate for stronger ethical standards for the protection of individual rights and for the meaningful reform in the way our institutions uphold justice. Tonight's topic brings those values sharply into focus. Our guest speaker, Will Sussman, has become a leading voice in the fight against antisemitism, particularly within our nation's universities and institutions that should be places of learning, safety, and equality. Will holds a bachelor's degree from Yale University and a master's degree from MIT, where he served as president of MIT Graduate. In recent years, he has spoken out boldly against the rise of anti-Semitism on campuses, even taking legal action after enduring a hostile and discriminatory environment. His courage and persistence have made national headlines and have drawn attention from both policymakers and civil rights advocates. Last year, Will testified before the U.S. House Committee of Education and the Workforce, describing how anti-Semitism can take root not only in rhetoric, but in the very system that are supposed to protect students and workers. His story is a powerful reminder that discrimination, when left unchecked, erodes both personal dignity and the rule of law. At American for Legal Reform, we know that the promise of justice means little if it isn't applied equally. Whether the issue is anti-Semitism, bias in our courts, or lack of institutional accountability. We believe that reform begins with individuals who have the courage to speak truth to the power. Will Sussman is one of those individuals. So tonight, as we listen to his story and insight, let's consider how his fight aligns with our broader mission, ensuring that the law protects everyone equally without fear or prejudice. Please join me in welcoming our guest speaker, Will Sussman.
Can you hear me? Yes. Excellent. Hi, everyone. Thank you for that very kind introduction. I also just want to thank our veterans, because you can't thank our veterans enough. I believe one of the people in this picture is here tonight. If there are other veterans in the audience, could you stand to be recognized? Thank you. All right, so I'll jump right in. I figured the title of the talk is From Long Island to Washington, How I Fought Anti-Semitism All the Way to Congress. And so I figured it would be fitting if I showed a picture of me in preschool. This is from 2002 over at North Shore Jewish Center. It appears to be a Hanukkah celebration. And that was the beginning of my Jewish journey. I'm not the most religious person. I went to Jewish preschool, became a bar mitzvah at 13, the usual rite of passage in the Jewish community. And after that, I wasn't so involved in Jewish life. I was an engineering major. You heard in the introduction, I ended up going to MIT for grad school. I was very focused on my studies in electrical engineering and computer science, not in fighting anti-Semitism. But October 7th was eye-opening, and this was what was posted on October 8th up at MIT. You may have heard, because it was all over the news, about the 30 or so student organizations at Harvard that blamed Israel for the terrorist attack the prior day. Unfortunately, Harvard was not alone. This was happening, it seems, on every college campus, including mine. And so it says, "Long live Palestinian resistance, victory is ours," both in English and in Arabic. And they were going to have a rally and march outside of Cambridge City Hall. And lo and behold, at that rally outside of Cambridge City Hall was my union representative. He, the man pictured here, is the only paid employee who is not also a member of the union. He was hired specifically to perform union duties. And to my surprise and shock, he told the news in this interview, which is publicly available online, that those who rebel against oppression cannot be blamed for rebelling against that repression. Which was very disturbing to me, and should be disturbing to everyone. Especially because a union is supposed to represent its workers. It's supposed to fight for better pay, better benefits, but that's not what my union was doing. And this was October 9th, 2023 that he gave this interview. Turns out, it was not a surprise to many people who were watching this space. The particular national union that we were affiliated with was United Electrical. And as far back as 2015, they adopted this resolution that they say is for peace and justice in Israel and Palestine, where they encourage the union at all levels to become engaged in BDS, the Boycott, Divest, and Sanction movement. We also learned after the fact that when they were planning on forming a union at MIT, there were discussions about following through on that national commitment to BDS. You can see these are meeting minutes that were leaked to us, where they say they're not going to use Wix, which is a website building site. They're not going to use Wix because it's an Israeli company and that conflicts with the national union's BDS policy. And so this was taken from, I think, 2018. So the signs were there for many years, but it burst out into the open on and after October 7th, 2023. Now, on that date, I was president of Hillel, which I thought meant celebrating Jewish life, being with other people in my community, things like Hanukkah parties and things like that. But once the union started going after Jewish students, people would come to me and they said, like, what are we going to do about this? Like, what am I going to do about this as Hillel president? And I didn't have a good answer. I had no idea. This was all new to me. And so what you see here, this is the Jewish community lunch at MIT, November 9th, 2023. It happens to be the anniversary of Kristallnacht, which was the beginning of the Holocaust. And on that date, whether intentionally or otherwise, the protesters on campus decided that they were going to occupy the main building on campus. And among those protesters, again, was my union representative. So here I am, you can see I'm in the foreground, asking, you can see standing by the whiteboard is the chancellor of MIT, second or third in command beneath the president, asking her what is she going to do about this particular situation. Because solving the conflict is above my pay grade, I'm not going to solve the conflict anytime soon. Solving the conflict on campus, also above my pay grade, not going to solve that anytime soon. But solving the very specific problem of the graduate student union going after its own members on campus, that was something that I thought I could bite off. And so I asked for help from the university, and help never came. So what you see on this next slide, this is a text from another union representative, where it says, this is a friendly reminder, I'm glad it's friendly, that as an RA or TA at MIT, you are required to sign up for dues or agency fees by December 5th as a condition of employment. Anyone who hasn't signed up by then will accrue back dues that will need to be paid, or their appointment may be terminated early by MIT. Please take a minute to sign up, reply with any questions, reply stop to opt out. To me, this was a veiled threat. What this is saying is, if you don't pay us, and what they don't state is that it's $700 per person per year, for the privilege of doing graduate studies at MIT. If you don't pay your $700 per year for them to go and attend those protests outside of City Hall and do all kinds of horrible things with your money, if you refuse to pay for that, then you will be terminated. You will be fired as a graduate student. That was the threat being made here. And I took a simple stand. I said, no. I'm not going to pay $700 for you to go protest constantly. You're welcome to protest. You have a right to free speech. This is America, after all. If you want to go and protest, be my guest, but don't do it in my name. Don't do it with my money. And that was not good enough for them. So I did some legal research, again, as like an armchair lawyer. I don't know anything about the law at this point. And I find this webpage of the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, which states that the union is required to inform all members of the bargaining unit about their rights to opt out. And I was very interested in such rights because my union was not doing what it was supposed to be doing. But as you can see in this text message, there's no language about that. It's only talking about how you have to pay them or else. There's no opt-out option here. So it was my contention that this text message was illegal. And I filed a charge with the National Labor Relations Board to that effect, saying that this was illegal coercion. They didn't tell us it's called Beck rights, the Supreme Court decision, Beck v. Communication Workers of America. And so I filed this charge with the National Labor Relations Board, and jumping ahead in time a little bit, this is from April, the following April. We won on that charge. The National Labor Relations Board affirmed that indeed the communications from the union did not include the Beck language as required by law. And this notice, which was signed by the president of the union, was plastered all over campus. I personally went out and plastered this notice, which was not required, but I did it anyway because I wanted to make sure not only that people knew their rights, but that the union knew that we were not to be messed with. But jumping back to November, December, this was not satisfactory. It's great that we won this small victory, but knowing your rights is only the first step. There still remained the matter of them demanding payment, or else we would be terminated. And the rights that are granted by the NLRB do not help with that. And so I turned to another recourse, this from anti-discrimination law. There is, I forget which branch of Christianity, it may be the Church of Latter-day Saints, but don't quote me on that, that forbids membership in unions. And there was another court case that found that you can't create an exception for just one branch of one religion. If you're going to create an exception, you have to create it for everyone. And you have to have that exception because if you deny such an exception to a religion that it's against their religious beliefs to join the union, then you just infringe on their religious freedom. So this exception exists under law that no matter what religion you're a part of, whether you are a Catholic, a Jew, a Protestant, Muslim, doesn't matter, you have the right to object on religious grounds to paying the dues. You're still considered bound by the contract, but you are not required to pay if you have a religious objection to what the union is doing, which I clearly had. What they were doing was in blatant contravention of my religious beliefs, and so I sent them this letter. Very simple. I included some boilerplate language about my name, my address, which union I'm a part of, my employee identification number, and I state that I'm Jewish and BDS is anti-Semitic, and so therefore I cannot, in good conscience, be a member of this union. So I sent this letter, when is it dated? December 4th, 2023. Later that day, the union sent out its own email to everyone where they say they stand united in condemning MIT's recent infringement on our community members' freedom of speech and right to peaceful protest. What they're referring to there is, if you remember that November protest where they occupied the building on campus, the university slapped them on the wrist. I actually felt that they didn't go far enough. They actually went so far as to state that many of the students would not be punished because it would have implications for their visa status. And so the fact that they have a visa served as a get-out-of-jail-free card. I happen to believe that if you commit crimes or other infractions, that it should not matter what your status is. You should be punished accordingly and let the chips fall where they may. But MIT slapped them on the wrist. They suspended the student organization that spearheaded that protest. And here the union, moments after I sent my letter to them, was proving my point. They were coming out against the university for enforcing its own rules. And they were defending the students who were harassing Jewish students on campus as opposed to defending the Jewish students. December 4th might also sound familiar, or rather December 5th, because the next day was that famous hearing with the presidents of Harvard, Penn, and MIT. So you can see Claudine Gay is all the way on the left, Penn, Liz McGill is her name, she's sitting next to her. Then there is a professor from, I believe, American University, and all the way on the right is the president of MIT. And it was the hearing heard around the world. You might recall they were asked one by one, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate your rules on campus? And they refused to say no. They said, it depends on the context. Over and over, one by one. They said it depends on the context. Again, this is all after I've already submitted my letter to the union stating that I can't be represented by them. The very people who were calling for the genocide of Jews on campus. So here they are again. They're out protesting. This is now late January. And you can see in the middle of the photo, there is a sign that says anti-Zionism does not equal antisemitism. And where do they choose to hold this protest against the, what do they say? We won't stand for this and defend our harassment and discrimination protections. Where do they choose to have this protest? Outside of the Harassment and Discrimination Office. For the crime of, again, slapping the protesters who were harassing people, for slapping them with punishments, they got this protest from the union. Again, proving the point that I sent in the letter. So finally, I get a letter back from the union. And I'll just read this because it's truly remarkable. They write, "Dear Mr. Sussman, I am in receipt of your December 4th, 2023 letter, in which you communicated your objection to paying dues or fees to the union because of your Jewish faith. After careful consideration, your objection is denied. First, no principles, teachings, or tenets of Judaism prohibit membership in or the payment of dues or fees to a labor union. Historically, many Jews, including founding UE director of organization James Matlis, have been members of unions, which continues today." It's the Jewish Friends defense. They know a Jewish guy who's in a union, and therefore I can't object. But continuing. Secondly, the statements in your letter demonstrate that your objection to paying dues or fees is based on your political views and not your religious belief. For example, you objected that, quote, UE endorses the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, or BDS, end quote. This and other statements in your letter constitute disagreements with positions taken or policies endorsed by the union. For the above reasons, your objection to paying union dues or fees is denied. And so now they've crossed a line, if they hadn't already. I filed a charge of discrimination. with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Because, again, I have the right to object, and it is not their place to tell me what my religious beliefs are. Who are they to say what I believe in? What is my religious belief? And so we filed a charge of discrimination. And I won't read this because it's legal versions of everything we've been discussing so far. But hopefully you get the intuition that they cannot tell me what my religion is. I have a right to decide what my religion is. And I'm allowed to exercise the exception in law, just like every other religion, based on any other religious objection to paying the union. And you may have seen, if you read the Wall Street Journal, I wrote about this in their pages. The title, fun fact, when you write an op-ed, you don't actually decide on the title most of the time. So I did not come up with this title, but they wrote, "My union dues are being used against Israel." And in this article, I tell the whole story that I just told you about the union coercing money for the purpose of protesting against Israel. And at this point, MIT caved. Because you have to understand, when the union made the contract with MIT, which stipulates that you have to pay or be fired, that was a voluntary contract that they made with the university. And the university has a choice to make. They can either enforce the contract that they voluntarily entered into with the union, or they can choose not to enforce it. And it was very clear.
How is that a contract?
Say again?
How is that a contract? If I signed the contract, but I don't have to do anything. I can do what I want.
Well, right. So
That's not a contract.
Right, and this is why we had a legal battle. So the question was, how is that a contract if they have a choice about whether to enforce it? Legally speaking, they probably are required to enforce the contract that they entered into. The problem is, I believe they entered into an illegal contract. I believe it is not constitutional to enter into a contract that requires employees to give up their religious beliefs, which is fundamentally what was happening here. And so now MIT is backed into a corner. They can either enforce the contract that they are obligated to enforce by contract law, or they can listen to my interpretation and not enforce that part of the contract. I see another hand. Go ahead.
Let me get next time, I'm just going to put your hands up. I'll get a mic so everybody can hear it. Okay.
Sure.
Hi, how are you? The only question I have is, because you mentioned that there were numerous groups within the student body who were, I guess, taking part in some of what you were talking about earlier. Do they get funded somehow? I mean, where does all the money come from to fund all these groups that have so many different facets and features to project what seems to be a very targeted and specific message? Okay, so where does the money come from? Who's funding some of these groups to do these things? That's what I would really like to know.
That's a great question. Thank you. So, by virtue of being a registered student organization, which most of the time they're registered, that entitles them to some funding from the university. Most students pay, actually probably every student pays, a student life fee, which is usually about $125, if I recall correctly. And so you multiply $125 times however many thousands of students, there's a big pot of money that then gets divvied up roughly equally between all the student organizations. And so when MIT, in my view, slapped one of these organizations on the wrist, one of the more substantive things that they did was they suspended the organization from being able to access that money. And so when the union is saying, oh, they're infringing on our right of speech, what they're complaining about is that their funding stream was cut off, which is a win from my perspective, but it didn't go nearly far enough because many of the students, the individuals who compose these organizations, they did not personally experience any consequences for their actions. And so oftentimes what they'll do is they will create a new shell organization in order to get around the ban. It's like North Korea, right? Like they'll change the name of the organization so that on paper it's not a banned organization, but it's made up of all the same people. And so they get their ability to book space on campus, they get their funding, and it's possible, although I don't know for sure, that they're getting outside funding as well. So I hope that answers the question. Great. Yes, go ahead. Oh, just wait for the microphone.
So they can hear you.
All right.
Thanks.
I was late coming here, so I didn't get the opportunity to hear you frame the question. Now, because there's a couple of things happening here. Let's say I'm against Israel's behavior, but I'm not an anti-Semitic. You accept that as a real possibility?
Yes.
Well, I better be anti-Semitic. Half my family is Jews. But no, seriously. I think these are two different questions. And what do you say?
It's a great question. So, personally, I also have critiques of the state of Israel. I don't know too much about Middle Eastern politics. Again, I was studying engineering. But from what I understand, there are policies that even I would criticize. And it's certainly not anti-Semitic to have those critiques and to air those critiques.
Because half the Israelis are anti-Semitic by that other definition.
That would be the case, right. So there's an important distinction to be made here, which is that the conduct that we were seeing on campus was not merely protest against Israeli government policy, it was crossing into harassment and discrimination. So I'll show on a later slide, there are police reports of people being assaulted. That is not protesting or criticizing the state of Israel. That's harassment. And so there was real conduct issues apart from the speech issues. If the protesters, like in another universe, if all they were doing was sort of standing on the sidewalk, holding up their signs, saying even very offensive things, if they're doing it peacefully on the sidewalk, that's perfectly okay. There are two things that I object to. One is, like I said, when it crosses over into harassment and discrimination. And the second is that I also have a right to speech. They cannot demand my money and then use that money to advance their speech, because that violates my speech.
Can you interject your opinion and therefore satisfy your ability to speak out? In other words, would you be, is there a forum or someplace for you to get your opinion out there?
Yes, but it's the issue is that they are using my personal funding for their own speech that I don't agree with. And I believe, and again, I'm not a lawyer, I probably should have started by saying I have no formal training in the law, so this is all sort of armchair lawyer talking, but I believe that it is established in law that money is a form of speech. I think this was the central premise of the Citizens United case. Whatever you think of that case, demanding money from their members to then go express on behalf of those members in their name. It was not even merely them saying, we need this money and we're then going to go do protests. It was, we're going to protest in your name. We're going to represent you at the bargaining table, and we're going to claim that what we want in your interest is for X, Y, and Z policies of the state of Israel. Which, even setting aside everything that we were just discussing, there is nothing that can come out of a contract negotiation with the university that's going to meaningfully change the policies of the state of Israel. And so it was not in my interest for the union to be using $700 per person per year to be expressing themselves or, in fact, harassing and discriminating against Jews on campus. I have a right to withhold that money. Does that make sense?
I mean, it's a logical argument, whether I agree with it or not. It doesn't matter. I was an elected official in a union when I was a young man. And I believe we had the epitome of free speech. In fact, that's how I got elected, because I pissed off the bigwigs, and they said, maybe you should take this job. Anyway, but that's beside the point. I think that I just can't picture a union being limiting your opinion. Now, if it was just a matter of getting your opinion in there, would that have made a difference?
I'm pretty pessimistic about this particular union. I think you're raising a really interesting point, which is that most unions, you're right, it's hard to believe. I couldn't believe it in this case either. And in fact, one of the major challenges throughout this whole struggle was getting other people on campus to see the problem, because most people assume, by definition, that a union is helping its members. But unfortunately, this particular union went completely awry. And it seems to be a problem of graduate student unions in general. I've done some work. I'll talk later about how I joined the Manhattan Institute for several months. And in my capacity there, I wrote about there's a split in the labor world between, generally speaking, blue-collar workers and white-collar workers. And these sort of like graduate student unions and teachers unions, unfortunately, are veering into this anti-Semitic pattern that I believe violates the freedom of speech and religion and association rights of the Jewish members of those unions. So, if you have another question about it, we'll come back to this point.
We'll wrestle after the meeting.
I'm sorry, well, I should have asked you, well, I guess what we'll do is instead of being, you keep getting questions like that, maybe we'll wait at the end?
I'm happy to take it interactively.
Either which, okay.
We got an intimate group here.
Okay, great, thank you.
So I wrote this article in the Wall Street Journal explaining everything that we just talked about. And this was, or it seems to be, the straw that broke the camel's back for MIT. Because again, they could choose not to enforce the contract, and suddenly their problem is no longer with me, their problem is with the union. Because the union expects them to follow the contract. And so it's kind of a lose-lose situation for them. But after this op-ed came out, they decided to side with the employees over the union, which they hadn't for many months before that. You would think that the union would also have responded to this kind of negative media coverage. You would think that they would start to listen to their Jewish members and try and do a better job, but it seems they only doubled down. So on the next slide, it's pretty small, so I don't expect you to read this, but the very next month, they passed a resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, which again, whatever you think of the conflict, I don't claim to know very much about the conflict itself. I don't believe it is appropriate for a domestic union to be using its resources, especially $700 per person per year, to be litigating a foreign war. In particular, actually, I should have pulled it up. I made a word cloud out of this resolution, and you can see that Israel comes up many times, and Gaza, but what never comes up once, Hamas, peace, hostages, none of this comes up. And this I think is sort of a perfect example of how the people who are writing this resolution are not actually interested in peace in the Middle East. They are taking a side in a way that harms some members of the community. Even if it's a minority of members, it's still very important that we don't discriminate against those members. So they passed this resolution, and the situation continues to spiral. So on this next slide, this is maybe my favorite slide in the whole presentation. Oh, we got a question.
Is it not illegal to be a member of Hamas, and especially attending an American university? I mean, let's just call it what it is at the moment. I have no problem with that.
So yes, it is illegal under federal law to give material support to a terror organization, of which Hamas is designated. Something like this does not constitute material support, as far as I understand.
That's your money getting allocated. Your money's being allocated providing material support to a terrorist organization.
So there's a nuance here, and it's possible that I don't understand it.
Just
Because
because you
again,
don't say the word Hamas doesn't mean that's not what's actually being spoken about. We don't have to not say the word.
right. So what they would say is that the $700 per person per year funds the general union activities, and among those union activities is passing resolutions, including something like this. And so it's not, in order to constitute under federal law material support for terror, it would have to be them directly transferring that money to Hamas. Whether statements in support of a terror organization count as material support for such terror organization, that is an open question. I believe it is the core issue in the case against Mahmoud Khalil over at Columbia, who I might add was a leader in the graduate student union there. This is not unique to MIT by any stretch. And they were giving out flyers that have the Hamas logo on it, as far as I understand. And so they allege in court, the plaintiffs allege in court, that constituted material support for terror. It was handing out physical, material items with the Hamas logo on it. And the question that is currently being worked out in the court system is whether that constitutes material support under the statute, or if material support is more a direct payment or provision of supplies, things like that.
Just not to be facetious, but I fought against the Taliban and Al Qaeda. Okay, we can call them what they are, right? They're clearly a terrorist organization. Right?
Yes.
You can't give them money for anything, correct? Legally.
Correct. Yep.
You can't take any money from any student body organization and create like a drug lab or something of that nature, correct? Because that's
Correct.
against the law.
Yep.
It's clear cut. It's against the law. It's illegal. We're not allowed to do it. So what makes a special caveat to be able to give Hamas any of this funding, illegitimately or in any other nature? What makes it legal versus illegal? I'm not trying to ask you to answer that in terms of the legal questions. I know you're not an attorney. I'd never put you in that situation, but I'm just very curious.
Sure, yeah, so I mean, I guess the distinction is that the money is not being given to Hamas per se. I believe it's being given to Hamas supporters in the colloquial sense of the word, not necessarily material support. And that's precisely the reason that I did not want to give that money. They're allowed to do expressive activities, including this. They're allowed to pass resolutions if this is considered speech. But I am not obligated to pay for such speech. That's the key distinction. I think I saw a hand over here.
You know, I'm not going to pretend to be a lawyer, but you use the word material support. Doesn't that sound like things, maybe sending guns or
Yes.
sending bullets or sending something? Material, but material support doesn't mean verbiage.
Correct.
And you're saying there is material.
No. So I'm saying it's an open question whether certain forms of expressive activity are in fact expressive, or if they are material support. So that the example of handing out handing out flyers with a logo on it, the fact that it's handing out the flyers, arguably that could be construed as material, but I think it's an uphill battle for that case because it is expressive.
I actually have a follow-up question on that. If there was an actual member of Hamas in the union that had perhaps authorship in this, would that have been considered material support?
Would what have been considered material support? Paying the money?
Yeah.
I mean, if there was an actual member of Hamas in the union, first of all, I think we have bigger problems. And I would hope that the FBI would be on it.
That's
But
the one we got now.
and again, I'm not a lawyer, but my best guess, if I could sort of steelman the counter argument, would be that the money is not going personally into the pockets of the members of the union. It's going into the union fund, and the union itself is registered as like a corporation, and the union is not a member of Hamas. We got another question.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Gary Glick from the Jewish War Veterans, and I had a question for a reason. You're still going to MIT, right?
No.
Or you're finished?
I'm finished.
But the students that are there, when you were there, before, I should say, what happened 2 years ago? Was this going on?
So the short answer is yes. If I go back to this screen, this is from 2018. So this is 5 years before.
I just want for a reason. And till this day, the kids on MIT are scared.
Yes.
Yes, okay. This is what I want to know. Can you get this to the proper authorities, not here, but they have, through the JWV, as I explained to you before, which nobody's been listening to anybody, as usual. We were started in 1896, and then it was anti-Semitism. They fought it then. Now, it's again happening again, and it's been quiet. But we have people that are now working on it, and if you get all this information to them, they could start working on it and
Sure.
see what they could do.
Sure, yeah. This is actually all, I'll reveal early that
Because-
most of these slides come from my congressional testimony.
Because I was told already, not only from you, that the students, even in Stony Brook, before this, are scared.
Right.
Or anywhere there's a Jew, they're scared. It has nothing to do with that, because I'll go back in time again, and I told you the story before. The guy's gonna be 102 years old, a veteran, and he came from Belmont. And he told me the story, and I thought it was bull, but it was not. And the quote was, he dropped his name, Irving Robert Miller. He dropped Irving for a reason. Because in those days, the kids were going after him because they told him, quote, and he gave me the quote, was, your people killed Jesus Christ. That's number one. Number two, he went into the service, like I told you, at 17, and he fought from 41 to 47. And not as a Jew, but he was a Jew. Came out, worked with the Holocaust victims. And this goes back to the time of 1896. So this is not new. So they would like, through the JWV, get a hold of this stuff here, if you have it, and possibly work on it, because I see what it is. It's the people here don't do it, or that they just brush it off. And that's exactly what goes on.
Right. So most of the material that I'm showing today, these are actually screen grabs from my publicly available congressional testimony. So there's a thick packet of information that I submitted to Congress, and I'm happy to forward you that link.
Because if you could share that with them, they have their own people that would do something. So, thank you.
Thank you. So let's jump back. We were here. No, we're here. All right. So what you see here is, again, the situation continues to spiral. So now we're in May of 2024. We're almost at commencement. In fact, the commencement where I got my master's. And this is just a few weeks before that. These are the police records, again, publicly available. I just went on the website and requested the records for that day because there was another protest, if we can call it that, where there was some pretty terrible conduct. So you see, I believe all of these people are students at MIT, maybe with one or two exceptions. So we see trespassing and disorderly conduct, assault and battery on a +60/disabled with injury, and assault and battery on a police officer. Trespassing and disorderly conduct, trespassing and disorderly conduct. And then the final one is, I believe that's not a student at MIT, but participated in the MIT protest. Again, using that word colloquially. Charged with trespassing, disorderly conduct, and assault with a dangerous weapon, parentheses, shod foot. So we have a couple of police officers here. I just want to give you all a shout out. You're very much appreciated in this group. It's sad that it's necessary to have police at an event like this, but thank you. So these are the people, the very same people. Ruth Hanna, if you recognize the name Ruth from that text message I was reading earlier, that's the same lady who gave that veiled threat and said, if you don't pay us $700 a year, we're going to get you fired. she was charged with trespassing and disorderly conduct at this protest. Now, fun thing about her, not to pick on her too much, but she was a graduate student, is a graduate student, who took time off, and our friend from the union might be familiar with this concept. She took time off from her studies, her work, for what's called union leave, which means because she was vice president of the union, she needed more time to focus on her union duties, and so in the contract that that the union entered into with MIT, they are allowed to have one or more people take time off from work, paid time off, paid by the union, not by the employer, out of those union dues, the $700 per person per year, in order to go do those union functions. Now this protest happened in broad daylight, middle of the week. This was not something that she did in her free time on the weekend. This is something that she was being paid by the union to do, to go get charged with trespassing and disorderly conduct. This is precisely the issue. If she wants to go get arrested for trespassing and disorderly conduct, she's welcome to do that on her own time. She is not welcome to do that with my money or in my name. That's the important distinction. So the students on campus wrote a letter, an open letter, to the leaders of the GSU. Around this time, because it's the end of the school year, we're also having union elections, and we wanted to make clear to whomever was going to assume power in the union that whatever you think of the conflict, whatever you think of this or that issue related to the conflict, it was just a poor use of union resources. They should be using that money and their time to fight for better wages and benefits. That is the purpose of the union. It could have been a great union, but they chose to focus on these culture war issues that very often became anti-Semitic in nature. And so 170 students on campus, which is still a minority, but 170 nonetheless, signed this letter expressing concern regarding the union's recent organizational priorities. The leadership has dedicated significant time and resources to take a position on the Israel-Hamas war, deviating and detracting from the union's core mission of representing the collective labor interests of all graduate students, namely wages and benefits. This has served to weaken our union and alienate its members. The leadership has claimed that MIT violated the contract by suspending graduate students for protesting. However, these individuals were disciplined not for protesting, but for disrupting free use of campus facilities after repeated warnings to stop from MIT. Moreover, time spent fighting these issues is wasted, as the collective bargaining agreement specifically states, the union acknowledges that it has no right to interfere with or grieve decisions regarding academic performance, academic discipline, or student conduct policy violations, including such decisions that may impact the student's employment. And so they specifically waived any claim to fight these issues in the contract that they signed, and then they turn around and try and use the same contract to demand payments to go violate the contract. It's really remarkable. Continuing, we are disturbed by the union leadership's irresponsible behavior in misleading the graduate student population. By falsely claiming that MIT violated the contract, they undermine the credibility and legitimacy of organized labor at MIT in all future disputes. The union is dedicating time and resources constructing grievances that are not protected under the contract, rather than focusing on issues that affect all graduate students, such as pay and healthcare coverage. We call on the union leaders to faithfully represent the collective unifying interest of the entire graduate student population, or resign. Of course, they didn't listen to us, but we made a valiant effort, and it caught the attention of a certain congressman. You might recognize him. He's now the chairman of the Education and Workforce Committee, and here he is. This is a screenshot from a hearing in June, where he's holding up a printout of that Wall Street Journal article that I wrote. And he's asking a lawyer who I believe formerly worked for the NLRB about the tension that someone asked about earlier. There is a real tension between freedom of speech and what's happening here. And so the Congress is doing its job. At least the House is doing its job. They are exercising oversight over the federal law that grants the union the power to compel wages, to compel dues, or else you'll be terminated. And I had the opportunity the following month, after they introduced this into the congressional record in June, I had the opportunity to testify myself. So that's me a little over a year ago, July 2024. Again, testifying about my experience that we've been talking about tonight. Not nearly in as much detail. They only give you 5 minutes, and I think because I was nervous, I spoke only 4 minutes. You can probably tell I tend to speak quickly, even among friends. So that was sort of the pinnacle of my battle with the union on campus. Maybe I'll pause there before I get into what's come after this, if there's any questions about what I've said so far. I know we've been taking questions all along, so we may have exhausted the questions.
We'll come up with one.
Sure. So I made it all the way to Capitol Hill, and at this point, as mentioned before, MIT gave in to our demand that they not enforce the part of the contract that requires us to pay them. So we won. We have this sort of, it's kind of an unstable arrangement because again, they're required under the contract to charge that money. And so they are theoretically facing a lawsuit from the union for not enforcing. But the union bringing that lawsuit, it's really a no-win situation for them because they would be suing the employer to fire their own members. And that's, they don't want to die on that hill. So they never brought that lawsuit. I don't expect them to bring that lawsuit. And in fact, other students from, whether it's other religions, there are many Catholic students who disagree with other positions that the union takes on social issues that it need not, because again, they could be fighting for better wages and benefits. There are Catholic students at the university who have now objected under the same religious objection. And this set a precedent for other universities around the country, where students are now, in many cases, the same national union, United Electrical, trying the same tricks on other campuses and running into the same problems because now there is a successful model. People can follow what we did here and expect a similar result. So I've since moved on, sort of declared victory on this particular issue, and broadened my focus to other policy matters related to anti-Semitism. So the following September, I wrote a piece in Jewish News Syndicate titled "Schumer Must Pass the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act." Now this act was to codify something called the IRA definition, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism, which is powerful because it includes several examples in order to distinguish between what you asked about earlier, about what is just criticism of the state of Israel. The definition goes out of its way to say that criticism alone is not anti-Semitic. But there are instances where people try and use the veneer of criticism of Israel to get away with harassment and discrimination. And the purpose of the definition is to help, whether it's administrators on campus or employers throughout the United States, to be able to distinguish when something crosses the line into harassment and discrimination. And in fact, this is kind of already the law of the land, at least in terms of executive administration. It was first put into place under the first Trump administration. Then it was expanded under the Biden administration, and expanded again under the second Trump administration. So, as is, this is the working definition of anti-Semitism in the U.S. for federal purposes, across all departments, as it relates to, I believe, Title VI. However, suppose someday we have a President AOC. God forbid, in my opinion.
Well, I would love it.
It would certainly be interesting. That's one way to put that. But I'm not confident that that executive decision would remain. And so I think it's very important that the legislative branch, Congress, codify this policy into federal law. And it really doesn't do much. It goes out of its way, again, to distinguish when something is freedom of speech and when it's not. And so it's not intended to restrict anyone's freedom of speech. But many on the left are running with this argument. And for this reason, Chuck Schumer, who at the time was the Senate Majority Leader, he refused to bring this to a vote. He claimed that he was personally in support of it. In fact, when he was no longer Majority Leader and this came up for a vote in the current Congress, he did vote for it. But it doesn't really mean much because when he had the power to bring it to a vote, when it would have had a bipartisan majority, members of both parties, Republican and Democrat, would have voted for this, and at the time, President Joe Biden would have signed it. But Chuck Schumer single-handedly blocked it from being voted on. Didn't even give it the time of day. And the reason is he didn't want his members to be forced to take a vote that would potentially be used against them in a primary from people even further left. They would be forced to vote on, again, a pretty milquetoast, I think, definition of antisemitism. If you're interested in specifics of what it says, I encourage you to look up this article. I explain sort of in depth why I think it's a good bill. But many members of his coalition would have voted against it, and that would have been used against them. And so in order to shield his coalition as then the majority leader, he did not bring it up for a vote at all.
Could you give us a couple of examples they put into that thing so that we know what that, that's just a title.
Right. So for the full explanation, I would encourage looking up the piece.
No, I don't want you to give me the whole law.
Right. So one example off the top of my head is that treating someone differently because they are Jewish or Israeli is discrimination. Again, it's not really reinventing the wheel. It's just sort of restating that discrimination protections under the Civil Rights Act of 1964 also apply to Jews. That you cannot discriminate against someone on the basis of their shared national origin. That has nothing to do with views on policies of the State of Israel.
Why is that even controversial?
I agree. It shouldn't be controversial. But there are people who are framing this in a way that they say, oh, this is coming after free speech. They say, if you protest against the State of Israel, then you are in violation of this definition. This definition says you're anti-Semitic, they claim. And it's a tactic because what they really want, in my view, is to be able to get away with anti-Semitic discrimination and harassment, and passing something like this would stop them from doing that. Or at least it would help stop them from doing that. And so they're vehemently opposed to it for that reason. But you're right, it should be pretty easy for any senator to vote for it. It's the reason why it passed the House overwhelmingly. I think 400 out of the 600 members voted for it, well above the 213-member threshold to get a majority. I think the split was, I think there were 70 Republicans who voted against and about 100 Democrats who voted against, but then the balance, the 400 or so, voted for it. So it shouldn't be controversial. So now getting into some of the more recent work that I've been doing. What you see here on the left is State Senator John Velis up in Massachusetts, and his colleague in the legislature, State Representative Simon Cataldo. And at this point, I'm out of MIT. I'm working at the Manhattan Institute, and I get a tip that there was a hearing in the State House, pictured here, on the subject of anti-Semitism in the K through 12 system. So not just higher education, but also in K through 12. And as you can see above their heads, they're projecting an image of some of the materials that, surprise, surprise, the teachers union was distributing to its members in the K through 12 system. And if you can't make out what that is, it is a Star of David, the Jewish star, made out of dollar bills. Classic anti-Semitic trope. should be very easy for anyone put on the stand to immediately say that that is an example of anti-Semitism. No questions about it. But you even see in this photo, it's a great photo because the representative on the right, Representative Cataldo, asks the president of the Massachusetts Teachers Association, which is the union that was distributing that material, he asked him, you'd agree that this is anti-Semitic imagery, correct? And the picture starts to get his response, where he says, I'm not going to answer that. He refuses to answer the question. Again, presented with a Star of David made out of dollar bills. He's asked point blank, you'd agree that this is anti-Semitic imagery, correct? And he says, I'm not going to answer that. Now, irony of ironies, that union president himself is Jewish. And so there's a whole other conversation to be had about the disagreements within the Jewish community. But I think he failed his Jewish members. There are many Jewish teachers. In fact, the person who told me about this hearing is a teacher, a Jewish teacher in the Massachusetts Teachers Association, who was not comfortable going down the route that I went with my student union. This teacher wanted to maintain their membership, wanted to continue paying the dues. They just wanted to get the anti-Semitism to stop. And unfortunately, it has not been very successful. The best that we've gotten, I wrote an article about this, again in my capacity at the Manhattan Institute. If you've heard of the Free Press, it's a great outlet. It's positioned somewhere between the liberal New York Times and the conservative Wall Street Journal. It's somewhere in the middle. And this is an article I wrote with one of their staff reporters, Franny Block. And what you can see in this image is not just that Star of David that we saw on the previous slide, but all those other posters that you can see, those are posters that are being distributed and posted in children's classrooms. I'll draw your attention to the one in the upper left, where there is a terrorist holding an assault rifle with the words, "What was taken by force can only be returned by force." That is being distributed in children's classrooms in Massachusetts by the teachers union. This was the subject of the hearing. And so I wrote this article in the Free Press with my co-author. And we got the teachers union to blink. They said that they would be removing some of these materials. They did remove, I think, 2% of all of the materials that they were distributing. And there has unfortunately not been much more progress since
What
then.
age was it directed to?
So this is meant for young children, I believe.
And they would put a thing in like, fuck off?
Yes. It's crazy, I know. It sounds unbelievable. I see we've got a hand over there. Do we have a microphone?
I don't need a microphone. I might be obtuse, and I'm certainly not anti-Semitic, so you know that.
You need a microphone.
It's in our family. What's wrong with, I'm not sure what the symbol with the dollar bill, I know it's Star of David, but why is it? I'm missing the.
Sure.
I'm just missing.
Sure, yeah. So one of the most classic anti-Semitic tropes is that Jews are greedy and that we only care about money. And so making the symbol of Judaism, it would be like...
The symbol is Star of David. I just didn't understand that the dollar meant that it was money that the Jews were. I get it now, but
Right.
it wasn't obvious.
Right.
It was obvious. Obviously, it's not obvious because I just.
Sure. So yes, they have this classic anti-Semitic trope about greed. There's obviously stuff that it's just plain wrong, like the assault rifles. That, by the way, is not the only assault rifle. If you look in the upper right corner, it's hard to see because of the color scheme, but the man in the middle is also holding an assault rifle. Above him is the founder of the PFLP, which stands for, if I recall correctly, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which is a designated terrorist organization by the United States and many other countries. That terror leader, it would be like if there was a poster of Osama bin Laden in a children's classroom. People were calling, teachers would be calling Joe Biden a serial killer for his support of Israel. There's another anti-Semitic trope that's buried by the Star of David there. But you can see there's a hand grabbing a snake. That snake is, I believe it's the tongue of a person that is labeled like a Zionist. Snakes are another classic anti-Semitic trope. It was actually used by the Nazis. I should have put in for comparison, a poster that was used during the Nazi era of the Nazis calling Jews snakes. So there's, again, like very blatant anti-Semitism here. And the President of the Union refused to take a position. He could not say that it was anti-Semitic. So that's up in Massachusetts. And the silver lining of that piece of the story is that the fact we know about it at all, like obviously I'm not a teacher in a K-12 classroom. I don't have like direct knowledge of what goes on. The only reason I know about this is because there were two state representatives, a representative and a senator, who, to their credit, bucked their party. They're both registered Democrats, and they actually held some hearings on this subject in the State House, which is how we know about this at all. Credit is also due to the teachers who brought it to them in the first place, who want to see their union become better. But I was particularly impressed by the leadership shown in the State House up in Massachusetts. And then I looked to my own state leaders. New York is the most Jewish state in the nation, by a long shot. New York City is the most Jewish city in the world.
Otherwise known as Jaime Town.
I've actually never heard that. But yes, New York is...
You know who said that, right?
No.
Jesse Jackson. And
Huh.
he made an offhand comment, and it was all over the papers, and it was a long time ago.
Sure.
How old are you?
I'm 26.
I'm okay.
But yes, New York is the most Jewish state in the nation. Similarly, Democratic in terms of the composition of the State House, as compared with Massachusetts. And so I thought maybe there would be a similar effort going on in my own state of New York to, if nothing else, to expose what's going on. And there are some things going on in the K-12 system here, I've since learned. They're handing out study guides about the Middle East that accuse the Jews of being like settler colonialists who stole the land and other sort of biased content. And there was a line that I believe Senator Bellis used in the hearing up in Massachusetts, where he said that the purpose of education is not to teach students what to think, but rather how to think. And what we're seeing both in Massachusetts and New York is many teachers abusing the trust that is placed in them to teach kids what to think rather than how to think. And I want to see similar hearings in New York. But unfortunately, it looks like we're not going to get it. I wrote a piece, this is actually on my Substack, I believe cross-published also in the Brookhaven Messenger out east, illustrating how the equivalent representative in my area, which represents Stony Brook University, as pictured here, what you can see here is one of the, again, I hesitate to use the word protest, but I'll use it anyway. The students protesting on the campus of Stony Brook University. There's a sign there that says Intifada Revolution, which to my mind is a call for terrorism. There are the same issues present on the university campus, the same issues present in the K-12 school system. Children in the 3 village school districts have been reported to be giving Hitler salutes to the Jewish students, not just among their friends roughhousing, but specifically to the Jewish students. There's a local reporter on News 12. I won't use her name because I don't know if she wants me to highlight this, but her daughter is currently going through school, and she is getting bullied for the simple fact that she has a Jewish-sounding last name. So there are real issues, both in the K-12 system and in the higher education system, right here in New York and on Long Island. And our state leaders are doing nothing about it. In particular, the representative representing this area has a plaque in her office that says the great, I believe it's Edmund Burke, or at least it's attributed to Edmund Burke, The quote, I'm going to screw up the quote, so I don't want to try and
Enough
spout it
good
off.
men?
Yes, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil, that's the title, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Right. And she is constantly taking pictures in front of this sign in her office. And I agree, it's a great quote. I think it's true. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. So I ask the question in this piece, what has she done about the anti-Semitism in her district? Nothing. Nothing about the protest on campus, nothing about the Hitler salutes in the middle school. Also at Stony Brook, a couple weeks ago, there was a swastika found. No one's talking about it. I went to Newsday, not interested. No one's talking about it. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. So moving on, this is now in June of this year. That again is now at this point the chairman of the Education and Workforce Committee. And we held this event, we called it the March on Washington for Jewish Civil Rights. Again, to simply demand equal treatment under the law. We don't want any special treatment, we just want to be treated like everyone else, which I think is a very reasonable demand. This was a bipartisan event. We had the Republican chairman, as mentioned. We also had a Democrat who renounced his membership in the DSA when he saw how radical they were after October 7th. And we organized this event in response to the murders of 2 Jews in Washington, D.C., Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram. They were perceived to be Jewish, walking outside of the Jewish Museum in D.C., and they were gunned down by a protester, just like the protesters you see in the background here, chanting "Free, Free Palestine." Again, to the extent that there are speech issues, people are allowed to have whatever beliefs they have, but I do believe that when left unchecked, as it has been on college campuses, that is how you end up with someone like the shooter who murdered Yaron and Sarah, chanting the same exact slogans as he guns down 2 innocent people, recently engaged, I might add. And so we organized this event in Washington, D.C., because we can't hide, we can't cower in fear, we can't say nothing, do nothing in response to something like that. We need to be loud and proud, out there. Again, we worked with the U.S. Capitol Police, as well as an alphabet soup of federal agencies in order to ensure that this event was secure. This was also right around the time that I believe the U.S. struck Iranian nuclear facilities, and so there was a high threat from Iran, and so there was a lot of tension in the air. It also happened to be 100 degrees Fahrenheit that day, and so if it looks like we're sweating, we are. And the greatest outcome of this event was not just that we had bipartisan buy-in and 30 grassroots organizations participate, but we got a press release from the Education and Workforce Committee where the chairman specifically highlighted not just the higher education issues, which, as you saw at the beginning, the hearing heard around the world with the university presidents, but I believe this was the first time that the Education and Workforce Committee took a serious interest in the issue at the K-12 level. They talked about, not specifically, but they talked about the same issues that we described happening in Massachusetts and in New York and all across the country, because this is happening everywhere. So that's basically the end of my presentation. Yes?
What do you think that we can do to make it different? I know where I am.
There you go, thank you.
I know where some of the people here are in this debate. But we don't change the world. We really don't. We just change ourselves. You know, we're in charge of me.
Right.
And so it's really a lot. What do you think you're going to do or can do? Or the society can do?
Vote Republican.
So I heard. So I'll repeat the question because it wasn't entirely on the microphone. The question was like, what can we do to push back against this? We can't change the world unilaterally, but we can maybe do something on our own to help move the needle in the right direction. And one person called out vote Republican. I happen to agree.
No, I don't. I think that anti-Semitism has flourished beautifully under Republicans.
So there is anti-Semitism on the right. That is true. Here's what I think about with regard to that. There is currently a debate happening on the right about the anti-Semitism on the right. Ben Shapiro just did a great segment talking about this issue head on, calling out Nick Fuentes and other figures like Tucker Carlson on the right for contributing to anti-Semitism.
Well, you gave me a couple of examples that support my opinion.
Exactly, right. But we are at least having this debate on the right. I don't see an equivalent debate happening on the left. The big problem that I see on the left is that the so-called moderates, the Chuck Schumers of the world, who I would have expected to be able to pass a simple bill just codifying that Jews have equal rights too. I would have thought that he would have stood up to the more radical wing of his side of the aisle, but he failed to do so. And they're all failing to do so. The only one that I see standing up, and I give him a lot of credit, is Senator John Fetterman from Pennsylvania. He is maybe the only member of the Senate who's registered Democrat that actually sees things clearly, in my opinion.
I can't imagine Bernie Sanders not being on your same wavelength.
Unfortunately, he's one of the worst offenders.
Are you saying he's anti-Semitic?
I think
I
some
mean,
of
that's
his,
ridiculous, actually.
No, it's not ridiculous.
I think some of his positions do cross the line. It is possible, and it gets into a philosophical debate about like what is anti-Semitic or not. And again, I often think like it's there's no point in arguing whether something is anti-Semitic or not, because say we decide definitively one way or the other, we haven't really accomplished anything. For me, it's about is it right or wrong. And I think a lot of the stuff that Bernie Sanders supports is just plain wrong. He does it respectfully. He is not out there calling for violence, but I do think he contributes to a permission structure where others do engage in such violence.
I see him as a critic of the state of Israel, but I don't see him as anti-Semitic. You and I already agree that that's a big difference.
There is a difference, yes. I think his obsessive focus on the state of Israel and other statements and positions that he's made, I think do cross the line. But again, it's almost beside the point. Like, I'm more interested in right versus wrong, rather than is it anti-Semitic or not. I see we have another question.
Yeah, well, no, it's not another question. It's to, what can we do? Right? So what we have to do is we have to uphold the Judeo-Christian values. We have to bring religion back into society. And you have to vote conservative because the Republicans are wet, spineless rags. And to this gentleman who thinks that Democrats are anything for the Jews, you're misinformed.
Yeah, because I just said one thing. If you're Democrat or Republican, they're both you see a Democrat or Republican, they're both the same for a reason. Because I can give you an example, and if I put out the example, I'll be all honest. We had a guy coming in. I'll call him A. He came in as a Democrat. Okay. Next thing he tells me later on, oh, they changed me because I was a Republican before because they didn't have enough Democrats. And that's not the only one. There's many more like that, but I wouldn't name the names.
So maybe I'll reframe it slightly. It's not about whether you have an R or a D next to your name. It's whether you do the right thing at the end of the day. And I think it happens to be the case that there are more Republicans willing to do the right thing than there are Democrats. But I see there's another comment.
Yeah, I think, have you ever read Tip O'Neill, the former Speaker of the House, his book, Man of the House?
I know the name, but I haven't read
Yeah,
the book.
it's an little bit of an older book, but he has a line. He's the one who taught the modern Democrats how to win elections. He has a very famous line in the book, I think will answer this question. He said, he taught the Democrats, it does not matter how you vote in Washington, all that matters is how you explain it back home.
Mm.
And I think that answers the Bernie Sanders issue and Chuck Schumer issue.
Right.
They vote one way in Washington, and then they explain it a different way back home. And this is how he taught the modern Democrats how to win elections.
Right. And I think what we're seeing now, and again, I'm no expert in politics. My background is in engineering and computer science. I see we have nodding heads. Very nice, very nice. I believe my relative goes to RPI as well. My view of it is that you're exactly right, and what's happening now is because of social media, it's becoming increasingly difficult to say something different when you get home than what you actually did in Washington. And so people like Chuck Schumer, I think both sides of the aisle are now very upset with him because he's trying the same old playbook and it's no longer working because we live in a new world. Go ahead.
You know, I've noticed this is a very divisive issue.
That's why we have 4 police officers.
And I think that's an understatement. And we've heard it said, you know, Republicans, Democrats, right, left. They're all controlled by attorneys. And when you look at it, the best way to control the unified political will of the people is to cause division and not let it get unified. So, would you speak to that in terms of a lot of folks just wanting to create division so that there can't be a unified political will?
I think you're onto something. We just saw this with the government shutdown. Again, I'm no expert, but it seems to me that the shutdown was mostly done for political reasons. It was so that the people who were standing in the way of the continuing resolution could go back to their constituents and say, look, I fought against the administration, I fought for this or that thing that we want to have done. Fundamentally, in a democracy, when you lose an election, you don't have the right to obstruct the government. To the extent that it was done on the other side, the other way around, I would say the exact same thing. So it's not just because I happen to have an R next to my name that I feel this way. But it seems to me that the reason that we had the shutdown at all is not because anyone wanted a shutdown. It's because these people are trying to get reelected and they want to be able to go back to their voters and say, look, I fought. As if fighting in and of itself is good. And I take issue with that. I would encourage voting in people who actually care about building consensus and doing the right thing. And in fact, you might have guessed, I do have a very specific way that people can help out. I'm actually seeking the Republican nomination for New York State Assembly in District 4. And so this QR code goes to the same site written above. If you or anyone you know would be willing to make a contribution, that would help me clinch the nomination. And then I can take this fight to Albany and fight the same battle that the Democrats of Massachusetts are fighting, but that the Democrats of New York are not.
Where was the District 4?
So District 4 is the same district as Stony Brook and Three Village and Port Jefferson, that area. Yeah.
What do you think can be done non-politically to counter the anti-Israel bias on campuses, on so many campuses?
Sure. So the question was, what can be done to counter the anti-Israel bias on campus? And one answer to that question is to think about it in terms of opportunity cost. I think there has been so much focus on that issue that it's taking away from all of the other issues that people could be focusing on. And if our schools, whether it's higher education, that I think you were asking about, or K through 12 education, if it would just go back to the basics and focus on improving math and reading scores, which are at historic lows, I believe both in New York State and nationally. If it would go back to focusing on the basics, go back to focusing on civil discourse, and not about protesting constantly. There seems to have been an admissions problem, both in terms of the students that are being invited to some of our most elite institutions, as well as many faculty. There are faculty who come to campus on a mission to encourage their students to go out and protest. That is not education, in my opinion. Again, education, as the state senator said up in Massachusetts, it is not about teaching what to think, but teaching how to think. And if we would just focus more on that how, rather than the what, I think we'll be in a better place. Yep.
I'm not homeschooled. That's what I did. My son graduated Duke University. He's working in Meta right now, and my daughter graduated from Lottie in Belfast University in 2 years. And they all think on their own, and they're all conservatives. And you gotta understand, Satan is in the middle, then the Republicans are on the right, the Democrats are on the left, but make no mistake about it, they're offending Satan. You gotta break the cycle, you gotta vote conservative.
So
Homeschool, because that's how you can teach your kids, and have kids.
so the suggestion was to have kids and then homeschool them. I agree that that's a good option for some. I think it's infeasible for some others. But also, more fundamentally, I don't want to just give up on the public education system. It is still, even if our own children are educated properly, whether it's homeschool or private school or whatever it is, or maybe like me, they got lucky and happened to have a good experience in public school. I think if we give up on all of the other students who are going through public schools that are not as good, we're still going to have a problem, because those students are going to grow up to have no ability to think for themselves. They're going to have all these beliefs that, as we focus on today, are oftentimes anti-Semitic, and then they become a problem for the rest of us. And so we can't just give up on fixing that system, even as we can avoid it entirely on our own.
They're indoctrinating people.
I think it's off.
It's what? And this is God's honest truth. Growing up, I went to public school. I grew up in this town. I went to this school system. Every day I'd come home, my dad would say, "What did they teach you?" I'm 65. Okay, what did they teach you? And I told him what they taught us, and then he would say, "This is correct, this is incorrect, this is how you have to look at it," and he would straighten us out every single day. If you keep on sending children to be indoctrinated, you're not going to win. You might have a couple of kids who are going to be able to be successful and not be indoctrinated, but it's the constant pounding. And if you know psychologically, but if you repeat something over and over and over again, and if you watch during COVID, what they did by pounding things over and over and over again, psychologically, people are weak. So I'm giving you advice as a father. Homeschool your kids. And
So
you can do it. It's easy.
You bring up another good point, which is that I think we need parents to parent as a verb. One of the reasons that I think I turned out okay, despite having been a public school student since kindergarten, all the way through 12th grade, is because my parents instilled in me, I think, the right mix of values. And so if I was ever exposed to any horribly biased materials, I would have known better, because I had that childhood with those right values. And so I think a lot of people, maybe they have a different situation at home, and then they end up going to a school that's not as good, and then they are funneled into a college that they can't afford, and so we end up, like, there's a lot of people out there who, frankly, I feel for them. Even as they say some hateful things, I feel bad because they lack all of this proper training that I was fortunate to have.
You know, I want to agree with what you said. Parenting is
Here you go, so they can hear you. Thank you.
parenting is a very important part of the education system, because what they get at home is going to be their biggest influence. My mother was an immigrant from Sicily, and she spoke perfect English, played piano, and she could write. So what an influence that was on me. It was an enormous influence on me. But you don't have, this is generation building.
Mhm.
In other words, you don't start tomorrow. Well, you do start tomorrow for the next generation.
Right. Yes, I do think we're like 30 years into the hole, and it's going to take us another 30 years to dig out of that hole. But as I think you were saying, like, you have to start at some point. My small way of trying to make that difference is by joining the legislature, hopefully, where I can have the opportunity to legislate some of these problems, legislate them away, I should say, and encourage this. Unfortunately, it's going to be a rough period in the interim as we deal with, as you said, like a generation of students who I think were not educated properly. But if we want to stop the bleeding, we have to start now.
It's a big project.
I agree. And if I win, it's something I'll dedicate my life to.
Give me a call.
I'd love to. Any other final questions? No? All right.
Okay, well, we'd
thanks very
like to
much.
thank you for coming out. How about a big round of applause? Thank you very much.
Jim, you want to announce the next meeting?
Yes. Our next meeting is going to be December 9th. If you want to reach out and speak, you can get a hold of American for Legal Reform at 631-421-6390 or email legalreform@optimum.net. I want to thank everybody that came out here. Again, I want to say thank you to each and every veteran, especially a shout out to my Marine Corps brothers and sisters who celebrated 250 years yesterday. God bless you all. Thank you.